so pleased to be hosting this event, and for a number of reasons. Firstly, Paul is an advisory board member at the museum and helping us in our exciting phase of repositioning and rebranding, so more of that in the year. Secondly, leading edge marketing and business thinking is core to our objective of exploring how brands shape our world. And the launch of Collaborative Advantage is just so relevant because it's great. I mean, what was the last one? I know you guys know better than I do. What was it, Blue Ocean or something? What was the latest one before this? Paul will tell us, I'm sure. And thirdly, having had Paul talk through his philosophy to us as a museum team, I see no reason for us not to adopt it as a model for the business, for the museum to move forward. There's the challenge. So if we're not here in 5 years, this is where it started. But I have a feeling we will be, and Paul will be part of it. As many of you know, Paul is the founder of the Agency of the Future, which helps leaders to achieve greater success by building collaborative advantage. He's also the founder of Pimp My Cause. All heard of Pimp My Cause? Yeah. Which engages marketeers in helping good causes and improving their own marketing capabilities in the process. And most importantly for today's event, he's the author of Collaborative Advantage, How Collaboration Beats Competition as a Strategy for Success. The book is already having a big impact on advanced readers. Anyway, it's in the before it comes out.
Are we the slow readers?
Long sentences. Good authors, people who read it in advance, and reviewers. After interviewing Paul on the Extraordinary Business Book Club podcast, Alison Jones said, "Truly paradigm-shifting books are rare, but Paul's argument seems to me both revolutionary and inevitable." Rory, great respect, Rory Sutherland, Vice Chairman of Ogilvy Group UK and the Spectator's Wiki Man, and one of the funniest men in advertising, in a good way. The book is a valuable contribution to the vital task of getting people to see the business world as a complex, interconnected ecosystem rather than as a sharp-elbowed race to the bottom. Isn't that great? Image. I encourage you all today to use the hashtag Collaborative Advantage when posting on social media about the event. So get it out there, up the sales. How much is going to charity? Oh, no, don't worry. Sorry. Paul does enough for charity. I look forward to hearing more about the book from Paul and from our panellists, but first, over to Ben Stevenson. Commercial Director for EMR, who has generously provided us with breakfast this morning. Thank you. Thank you.
Better if it was behind the bar, but we'll take what we can get at this time. Just a quick introduction. So for those of you who don't know, EMR are a specialist marketing recruitment consultancy. We've been going for around about 25 years. We've known Paul and Anna for a number of years now, and we've had a number of engagements with them to promote our collaborative advantage with them. We most recently did a charity day, and we've been able to introduce another 70 marketeers to Pimp My Cause, and we just find it's a really great union between what we're doing, talking to candidates and clients on a day-to-day basis, and giving them another avenue to be able to upskill and engage with marketing skills in a way that they might not have otherwise thought of. So for us, it's very much a win-win in terms of our partnership, in terms of the Museum of Brand, a very recent relationship there, and one that we look forward to building on in the future. So Paul, best of luck with the book, and great to be part of this. Thank you very much.
Chris, and I very much hope, I know there are plans for expansion, so I don't know whether I do hope that we'll still be literally here in 5 years, or we'll be somewhere, but I always find it very inspiring to be here, and to absolutely have the free run of the place like this. It's really wonderful, so thank you very much, and I encourage everyone, if you haven't done so already, to enjoy the time tunnel downstairs while you're still here today, and also to take an active interest in the activities of the museum moving forwards. Thank you very much to Ben and EMR for feeding us, and also for our work together that sees the talented marketing candidates taking those problem-solving skills they've acquired in business, using them to support our charities and social enterprises, and enhancing their own marketing capabilities in the process, which is a marvellous example of collaborative advantage in practice. Thank you to Tom and Duncan from Little Brown and all your colleagues for making the book possible in the first place, and for your support and collaboration throughout, and for making it available from today in Waterstone, Smiths, Blackwell's, and of course, most importantly and prestigiously of all, from the gift shop downstairs. Apparently Chris has generously lifted the ban on anyone buying more than 10 copies. And for just a small supplement, you can even get an unsigned copy. And thank you all very much for coming. And especially to those of you who have worked with me over the years through the Agency of the Future or participated in My Cause. It feels like a hit parade of my favourite people. And I've learned so much of what I know about creating collaborative advantage from people who are here today. And I very much appreciate your support, because challenging the idea of competitive advantage is not something that I would want to do on my own. You could argue that competitive advantage is the most successful idea in the history of ideas about business so far. And even I would say it's almost certainly been the most influential. Michael Porter, a great pioneer of competitive advantage, is to this day the most cited writer in the history of writing about business. When I started writing the book, I put the words competition and business into the search box on Amazon, and it returned over 13,000 titles. I didn't read all of them. But of course, business leaders around the world are right now using the concept to define their organizational strategies. Politicians are trying to find ways to increase competitiveness in the economy. And the specific concept of competitive advantage, and also maybe the metaphor of competition more broadly, have really come to dominate how we understand what it takes to succeed in business and in economic development. But while I'm as much a fan of anyone of the spirit of competition and a great rivalry in domains such as sport, I can't resist mentioning, because I just had a message from my friend Alistair from college days, who's coming here from the south of France, who's either just arrived or just about to arrive. So if he comes in, he'll know we've been talking about him now. But he was on the Oxford karate team, and I remember finding him one day limping around, looking quite forlorn, and starting to feel sorry for him, and it turned out he had a foot injury. And so, my compassion was awakened until I discovered that he got his foot injury on the back of an opponent's head. So I wasn't entirely sure that my compassion was pointed in the right direction. But while I can enjoy competitiveness in sport, and England is still in the World Cup, and in domains of business activity where it can add some fizz, I have become increasingly sceptical in recent years as to the usefulness of competitive advantage as the central basis on which we can best organise ourselves for success, whether in business or society. One of my formative experiences as a child, when I was 6.5 years old, was when my father had one of the first heart transplant operations. Now, that was made possible by innumerable acts of cooperation, and absolutely essential among those was an individual act of life-saving peer-to-peer cooperation, well before we had access to the internet or social media, or there was anything called the sharing economy, in the form of a motorcyclist who was considerate enough to carry a donor card. And that life-changing experience, among others, has helped me to appreciate more keenly the degree to which our business, our society, and our culture are at their best when driven by cooperation-enabling ideas. And that when we lose sight of those ideas is perhaps when we most lose our way. And I would suggest that the concept of competitive advantage has and can overshadow that truth in business and cause value to be left uncreated as a result. So in the early part of the book, I challenge some of the limitations of the concept of competitive advantage as a prelude for spending most of the book developing my proposed alternative in the form of collaborative advantage. So for example, where competitive advantage assumes that value is created within a business, I suggest that actually creating value is a far more collective process than we might typically perceive, and that most value is created in the spaces between us. So to give just one simple illustration to bring that to life, I was speaking about creating collaborative advantage recently at the Lowry Theatre on Salford Quay, so a couple of people who were there. And across the concourse from that theatre, there was a Pizza Express restaurant. And I would suggest that the value created in the Pizza Express restaurant is fundamentally inseparable from the value created by the theatre, because it's the theatre that gets you there and hungry in the first place. It's inseparable from the value created in the car park underneath the commercial building that the Pizza Express adjoins, because unless you just happen to be a very local resident, you're almost certainly going to need to drive there. And most importantly of all, it's inseparable from the value that you create yourself with your friends on your night out, because however tasty those American hot pizzas might be, it's far more likely that you choose to go on a night out and then work out where to eat than you say to yourself, do you know what, I must go to the Pizza Express on Salford Quays. I wonder if there's anyone I can drag along with me. So it's that kind of thinking that has led me to develop the concept of collaborative advantage as an alternative organising principle for strategy, and to identify the kinds of question that I explore in the book, such as how can businesses grow more quickly and effectively by better harnessing that fuller value creating potential of the environment and the ecosystem in which they operate, and of their customers as perhaps the primary and most important creators of their own value. I'm also very much interested in how society can better address social challenges by more strongly harnessing our own collective agency, and perhaps most importantly, the agency of the groups that we might be looking to support. And I'm interested in what kinds of methods and techniques can make it easier for leaders to accelerate these processes to fulfill their goals. Now, as you might expect from somebody who's written a book on collaborative advantage and has already said they prefer not to do things on their own, rather than bring some prepackaged examples that I made earlier, which in any case you can read in the book, which I don't know if I mentioned. So I've brought 3 friends, collaborators, and business leaders whom I greatly admire, who are willing to explore the particular challenges in business that they have faced and face in their roles, and what the relevance of collaborative advantage might be to those challenges. So we have, fresh from being named last week, I think it was, by the Marketing Society as Marketing Leader of the Year for 2018, Mark Evans, Chief Marketing Officer of the Direct Line Insurance Group, which as well as the Direct Line brand includes the Churchill brand and the Green Flag brand. We have Celia Pronto, who's Chief Customer Officer for the Casual Dining Group, which, if you don't know the name Casual Dining Group, you definitely know the chains of restaurants within the group. So it's Café Rouge, Bella Italia, La Tasca, Las Iguanas, several other niche chains. And we have Steve Walker, who was Chief Marketing Officer of Sony Mobile, and now runs a consultancy called Two Sides that specialises in leadership development and brand transformation. So maybe we could sit together at the front. And if I could start with you, Mark, if that's okay. So we think of the world of insurance as being dominated by financiers, and essentially all a question of the most basic form of price competition. So what difference were you able to make going in as a marketing leader to that environment? How might collaborative advantage relate to that?
Okay, so before I do that, I'm going to sort of flatter you a little bit, which is to say I'm really delighted to be here because and I think most people agree that Paul is one of the most just basically thoroughly decent people I've ever met. You're not blushing, so well concealed, but no, so I wish you every success with the book. And then the other thing I would say is that I think this notion sort of has been around, just talking to a couple of South African people before, is it in Indaba, you know, the notion, and actually I worked at Mars, everything that, for 10 years, everything that I sort of know relates back to that decade, and anybody who's worked there or worked with people who've worked at Mars knows that the 5 principles are really, really systemic, sort of ingrained in the middle of your eyeballs, you know, on your eyelids, and they really are dominant, and they have been around for 100 years, so it's not sort of a faddish thing. And one of them is mutuality, and the script says a shared benefit will endure, which led to different behaviour. For example, the concept of beating up suppliers just didn't really exist, or it didn't when I was there, and it was much more about the shared benefit with third parties, which is quite countercultural. So that's the sort of the prelude. I mean, insurance, yeah, I mean, one of the most commoditised markets in the world, least trusted sector in the world. Celia and I were having a conversation about automotive retail versus insurance, but Edelman says that the UK population is the least trusting population in the world, and insurance is the least trusted sector. UK insurance least trusted sector in the world, and it's been heavily commoditised. And I suppose the obvious thing, and the link to the book, is that the sector had lost sight of its purpose, its reason to be. In the end, very fixated on price and the point of purchase, to the extent that many people literally didn't know what they're buying, and the concept of insurance is to make things good when they've gone bad, not make things worse when they've gone bad. And so the notion of outside in, that's the sort of the part of the book where the case study lives. It's so intuitively marketing 101 to understand what the world really needs, what's missing, what's the gap, what do customers really expect and demand, and then bring that back into the organisation. And create a lightning rod for a different concept. And in this case, insurance is about fixing, what else can it be? And so making that come to life through the Winston Wolfe campaign, which is all very successful, but more so than that, understanding that even the person on the Twitter handle or on the phone or wherever they are or in the garages, what would Winston Wolfe do? How do I be a fixer? So I think that the lesson here is that there's sort of gold in looking out to what's really needed. All the partnerships, internal and external, that bring that big thought to life. And I think big thoughts live off of collaboration. Very hard to bring a big thought, a really big, life-changing, industry-changing, country-changing, world-changing thought off if you're actually sort of fighting with people to get it there. So creating a momentum is surely about collaboration, and then sort of my last linkage is, I grew up on rugby, and I had a few paper conversations with South Africans and New Zealanders in the room already this morning, but in the end, rugby is a game of collaboration. All shapes and sizes makes a team. Yeah, of course, then you kick the crap out of the other team, but the construct of rugby, and in the end, the teams come together, and it is the good of the game which is really the winner. So I think, it runs through so many things that I've observed in my life, that collaboration is a much more enduring, sustainable approach than competition. So a long answer, but hopefully that answers the question.
I love that concept of having a big idea and building momentum around that idea. I mean, that really gets to the heart of collaborative advantage. And the references to Winston Wolfe, has everyone seen the TV ads? That definitely reminds me, I'm long overdue watching Pulp Fiction.
I hope everyone's seen it, because we spent literally billions on it.
the Pimp My Cause marketing budget is a little less than that. So there's some cultural adjustment required. But one thing that occurs to me in terms of, you talk about the role of insurance in society, and the idea in collaborative advantage of customers being creators of their own value and then the people improving their own lives. Now this fixing idea, I suppose, to me, helps people, by clearing problems out of the way, helps people get on with their own lives much more quickly again. But I wonder if you see an even more active role for people to play in better avoiding having accidents in the first place, and if, as an insurer, there is anything that you can do to enable that.
Yeah, so the notion of fixing is brilliant right now, but insurance, who'd have thought? I mean, I didn't grow up as a boy dreaming of working in insurance, that's my guilty secret, but it turns out it's at the confluence of all the major tech trends right now, blockchain, AI, machine learning, connected home, driverless cars, who'd have thought, but it's really at that epicenter. And so there is a well-established notion, we're not the only ones talking about this, that insurance will move from a process of restitution, which has still got a lot of work to do, to a service of prevention. And many of the propositions we're doing now are sort of think Minority Report, so stopping things happening, bad things happening before they do. And so actually we launched a brand called Shotgun, which probably none of you will have seen because it's targeted at 17 to 19-year-old, particularly males. Sadly, you're 8 times more likely to kill somebody in your first year of driving. Last year, our biggest single motor insurance claim was £19.4 million. The driver was actually not hurt, but he put his 3 best friends in wheelchairs for the rest of their lives. And so the sharp end of insurance is actually pretty sharp. And so Shotgun, think Wingman, it's the app which gets people through that first 1,000 miles when they become measurably worse, when they think they're suddenly a brilliant driver. And so this is about how do we stop bad things happening. But it's in collaboration. So if we sort of, we'll take your data, we'll tell you when you're a bad driver, we'll price your insurance accordingly. That would completely fail with 17 to 19-year-olds. So again, it starts with outside in, what's really going on in their lives. They want rewards, they want to be incentivized, they want to feel good about themselves, they want to be good at things. And so again, it's an insight-driven process to get ahead of time, stop bad things happening in the world. And I think we'll see more examples of that. Insurance will become, and I think it will probably be seen in a better light when it becomes a preventative force.
And there must be so many applications for that, not just in this country, but if we think of all of the different types of problems that populations are exposed to in different parts of the world, that preventative model could become one of the most important things to our future.
Yeah, so then the final point on that is that you might have seen we did this thing called Fleet Lights, which was really leading edge technology stuff, swarms of lighting drones that light the way for passenger cyclists, motorcyclists, car, because more people die in the dark, more people die in the darker months. We then have launched something called the Smart Crossing, which hacks the road. It's an adaptive, responsive sort of road surface. We did this to sort of dramatise the notion of fixing in a broader sense, become the fixing brand of the UK. And then who'd have thought, but the UN contacted us and said, well, this stuff can help with the Sustainable Development Goals. So we don't know where that would go, and we really didn't bet on it or believe that sort of thing could happen. So I think this idea of big ideas can become monster ideas if you're pulling in the right collaboration around it.
Well, that's so inspiring. I mean, who would have thought that insurance could actually be such a powerful vocation?
Who'd have thought? Still the least trusted sector in the world.
So if we use the right hashtags today, I think we'll turn that around. And thank you for mentioning...
Can I just build on something? I think one thing I think is brilliant about that is you took your massive idea, but you turned it into something that every single individual employee could contribute to. So that idea of how can I be a fixer, I think that's the example of the best type of purpose, when it galvanises the whole organisation, but it can be broken down so every single individual employee can immediately find a way to contribute to it. So that's really brilliant.
I think there are some marvellous examples as well where people find ways to enable everybody inside an organisation to contribute and then everybody outside that organisation to contribute as well. I remember coming across the story of the founder of Atheist Shoes. Now, this was an advertising guy who quit his job in advertising to make what he wanted to be the world's most comfortable shoes. But although he had an advertising background, he had no marketing spend at all, because it was a little startup. So he thought, how can I get people to share the message for me? And so his first thought was, well, let's find a group of like-minded people like Christians, and he thought of putting water in the soles of the shoes so that people would literally be walking on water. But he himself was an atheist, so he thought that there may have been an authenticity problem. And so he instead embossed the words, "I am an atheist," under the shoes and sold them in places that had a lot of snowfall, so that people could sort of out their atheism to their friends by walking in the snow. It certainly helped him overcome the fact that his marketing spend was a little bit less than yours, Mark. Insurance, of course, is an important form of cooperation in terms of sharing risk. But an even more fundamental form of life-preserving and life-enhancing cooperation is, of course, sharing food. I think maybe we only realise how cooperative a process that is when something goes wrong. I remember hearing the example of an enlightened parent whose 3 children would always fight at dessert because, over who got the largest slice of cake. And so this parent instigated 2 enlightened rules of cooperation with dessert. Rule 1 was that at each meal it would be a different one of the 3 children who would cut the cake sequentially. And rule 2, whoever was on cake cutting duty got to choose the last piece. So all of a sudden there was a mathematical level of precision and equity. Now, I don't know how this relates to the casual dining room, but I do have...
We sell cake.
4 questions for you in one. Give us as much as you're willing to on this. But I know, so you have board level responsibility across the group for customer experience and also digital transformation. So what kind of challenges have you addressed in each of those, and how might Collaborative Advantage relate to those?
Right. Well, again, just echoing what Mark said, congratulations on the book. It's an amazing book. Definitely buy it. Definitely read it. And I think echoes, inherently what we're all great at as marketeers, which is collaboration, and it is working together to get our jobs done. So thank you for writing the book, Paul. Casual dining space. I think a lot of you have probably read the headlines about casual dining space. So the nature of a restaurant and the role we play in consumers' lives has changed. And what we inherently do is we provide a social space for customers to come together, whether that's with friends and family or celebration, whatever that might be. And that fundamental insight changes how we galvanize our business, whether we're thinking about the customer experience we deliver, whether we think about the menus, the food, right through to our digital experience. So if I take an example of the digital experience, how customers want to find us has changed. Consumers are no longer necessarily planning 2-3 months in advance unless it's for a special occasion. Frequently they want to know, where can I go in the next half an hour that's going to have a table available for me. So when we think about the digital experiences that we deliver for customers, we need to think about not only how we deliver that from a front-end perspective, but when we talk about collaboration, how do we make sure we've got our staff galvanized around how we deliver that when we've only got a customer that we know is going to turn up in the next half an hour? Do we have a table available? Do we have enough food available in the kitchen? Do we have enough chefs? So it fundamentally changes how we think about our staffing, how we think about our sourcing. When we think at the front end about the customer experience, that nature of what customers demand has also changed. So we see the rise of customers wanting to know where their food comes from. We see the rise of trends such as veganism. Vegetarian's obviously been around for a long, long time, but we also see a lot of allergens. So people gluten-free have become really big. So when we think about, okay, how do we think about those specific particular aspects, we start to think about our suppliers and our supply chain. How do we collaborate with them? And that's a really important piece for us, because when we think about how do we differentiate our business, how do we differentiate through our food? And our suppliers are really key to that in helping us come up with new concepts. Our staff are absolutely critical when we think about that customer experience. How do they deliver the customer experience? And I guess a little bit to what Mark was talking about, how can I be that fixer? If I take our Bella Italia brand as an example, we've got a hashtag we use in the business called Bella Delivers. And that really galvanizes our whole Ballot team around how does Ballot deliver that great customer experience for our customers. And for Café Rouge, we use Be More Rouge. How do we be more Rouge? And just do it in a Rouge kind of way. And that really galvanizes our people around how we collaborate together to deliver that customer experience.
Yeah, it's fascinating hearing about these different ways of essentially finding a particular angle on enabling people to better enjoy themselves. It's such a human business. I mean, I guess there must be some of Mark's customers that are quite happy not to hear from him if it's not renewals time and they haven't had an accident. Whereas you have a challenge that your customers aren't going anywhere until they've finished. And so maybe one question, maybe not for now, but for downstairs afterwards. I wonder if you've ever had a customer that was so extreme that there was just no way of cooperating with it.
I'm sure we probably had some of those. I'm sure we had. Oh, well, actually, I'll share this, which is unpleasant, which I know this is all about positivity. We had some, just after the Brexit vote. We had quite a few customers coming in and abusing our staff, and we did have to ask some customers to leave. So that's probably the only example I can cite where that was very poor collaboration.
Well, hopefully we can foster a powerful alternative wave to override that. I wonder, Steve, with your leadership coach hat on, and listening to Mark and Celia, if you have any thoughts on the relevance of collaborative advantage for leadership priorities.
Yeah, good question. And like my fellow panelists, I'm also going to offer my congratulations to you. I first met Paul 5 years ago, and one of the very first things he said to me was, I'm going to write a book. And here we are. So it's actually an incredible journey that we've been on together for the last 5 years. So the book is not just a triumph of collaboration, it's a triumph of perseverance. And I think collaboration can be quite difficult. I mean, it sounds great, and you've written about it in a very, very compelling way. But instinctively, not everybody wants to collaborate, even if it is a better way to deliver in the end. It's one of those things that you have to persevere, you have to be a little bit patient. And sometimes it's very easy for leaders to go back into their own little space with their own little team and think, I can just fix it myself, I don't need to collaborate. But actually, if you persevere, if you find a way to work and extend the value creation beyond your own immediate remit as a leader, then you can have the kind of impacts that you're describing in your book. But a leader has to be really committed to it, and they have to take responsibility for it. There will be many people that tell you as a leader, sort of stay in your area and I'll stay in my area, let's just get on and do the things that we're good at. So, you really have to extend beyond the things that you have authority for. It's leadership without authority, leadership with influence instead of leadership with authority. So collaboration where you're actually trying to galvanize resources that you cannot directly control, you cannot directly tell them what to do, but somehow you've got to convince them of the value of collaboration. I think we're seeing the dawn of a whole new age of leadership. A leadership where you can't rely on your job title, or you can't rely on your business card, or you can't rely on the budget you have, or the numbers of people who work for you. As leaders, we typically would say, well, I have this budget, 20,000 people working for me, and the best car in the car park. Those things will not be the things that wield power anymore. The things that wield power will be influence and the ability to convince and align people behind an idea. And that's what I really like about this, where in your case that you took a purpose that galvanized the business, but the leaders could then find a way to convert that into something that every single individual could contribute to. And so it requires a totally different type of leadership mentality if you're going to leverage the collaborative approach.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of starting with an acknowledgement that no one can, more than ever, no one can know it all. I mean, we're all affected every day by actions we can't see, in ways we don't understand, by technologies that we'll never fully get the better of. So I think all of us need to increasingly get better at working with others just to keep up, let alone to take anything forwards.
So to my mind, the leader in a collaborative world needs to think like the conductor of an orchestra. You cannot necessarily play any one or all of the instruments of the orchestra, and every individual will contribute a piece, but as the conductor you have to be able to somehow see the whole and see what the music is going to sound like once it's all played together. But conducting and orchestra or orchestrating collaboration is very, very important. That, to my mind, is the role of the leader in the collaborative model.
And that makes so much sense with the examples we've heard. I mean, in the restaurant business, the collaboration right through the supply chain, and insurance, with all of these emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, drones, driverless cars, they must all have implications for insurance. And unless the world's greatest expertise in these technologies exists within Direct Line, I imagine the collaboration must be an important part of getting on the right side of them.
Yeah, I mean, just on that point, I think Steve puts it really well, and I interpret that as the sort of the concept of leadership has shifted a bit about creating followership.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a subtle nuance, but there was a video that went around our organisation, which, as I sort of reflect back, was probably quite important. Has anyone seen the guy dancing on the hill? Yeah, if you look at Man Dancing on the Hill, it's a music festival. He's drunk or I don't know, whatever, dancing in a crazy way, and then one person chooses to go over and dance with him in a crazy way, and then 2 minutes later, the whole festival is dancing in a crazy way. And the way that the psychologists, behaviourists, whatever, analysed the video, they said it's the most important thing was the first person that came to follow that sort of normalised a new idea, a new approach. And had that not happened, then I think it would have been just a non-event. So I think, yeah, creating followership, which talks much more to EQ than IQ and drive, it's fundamentally a different approach. Different way to get to the same or a better result.
So before, in case there are any final comments, but a couple of you were kind enough to mention the outside-in framework. So that's a framework in the book for creating collaborative advantage. But I might just say a bit of the backstory to it that isn't in the book. So I used to live in Paris and would sometimes have a coffee on a Saturday afternoon just opposite the Centre Georges Pompidou, which I don't know if you're familiar with the building. Some people love it, some people hate it. But the key defining feature is that the architect chose to place the sort of functional aspects of the building on the outside for everyone to see, the sort of ventilation shafts, the escalators and so on, rather than hidden away inside the building. And I came to think that that was in some ways, first of all, it was very culturally influential. If anyone's ever worn the Nike Air Max trainers with the airbag visible, that was inspired by Pompidou. But I came to see it as in some ways a useful visual metaphor for things like open innovation and the open source software movement, taking the structural and functional aspect of something that would go on within a business and making it accessible for participation outside. But then I wondered if actually we could go further than that, and instead of just taking the inside of the business and making it available to people outside for participation, if we could actually do a better job of understanding, supporting, enabling, capturing more of the value-creating potential of the outside world, which is always much bigger, even if you have Direct Line's marketing budget, and find ways to bring more of that value inside your mission. So that was the story of Outside In. I don't know if anybody has any other comments they want to make based on the things they've said to each other. Otherwise, I'll wrap up with a couple of thoughts.
I think the only point I would add is also for us what we found, and this really plays to the strength of collaborative advantage, is the notion of collaborating with other brands. And particularly, again, when you have smaller budgets, finding those like-minded brands. And the point you made about Pizza Express earlier is actually really relevant for us. So we are all about that local. How do we locally understand the collaborative opportunities for us to work with local businesses, whether it's the cinema or whatever it might be, to actually collaborate at that very local level. So it works both nationally, but also at a very, very local level.
Well, I think now you probably understand even more why these are three people who are friends, collaborators, and people who I greatly admire. So I'll make a couple of comments, but thank you very much. Because I want to appear talented by association. That's very much the deal we're getting here. So I would just say, before we go downstairs, that a couple of things kept me going writing the book, and it was the conviction that creating collaborative advantage matters widely and urgently. So I think in terms of mattering widely, we've already seen that it can affect the holistic growth of important businesses. And in the room, there's already a much greater variety of ways in which collaborative advantage is being used to drive international development, to better address humanitarian crises, to keep people healthier, to get people enjoying sport more effectively, to grow new businesses more quickly. And of course, even this range is a drop in the ocean compared to the range of applications of collaborative advantage being pursued outside the rim. And I also think it is urgent right now, perhaps because of the particular conditions of uncertainty, maybe the increasing divisions between us, the challenges of complexity, and the resource constraints that we seem to be bumping up against quite hard. You know, for many of us, it's actually one of those unusual moments when it's very difficult to tell whether in some ways the worst is yet to come, or whether our best days can definitely lie ahead. And one thing that does seem certain is that our own actions alone will not determine which of the outcomes that we get. So viewing the creation of success through the lens of creating collaborative advantage can help us to exert our agency on that interconnected and interdependent environment. And it may be that our relative failure or success in creating collaborative advantage could be the key determining factor in whether the worst is still to come or our best days do lie ahead. So to make today not just a celebration of what we can achieve by working together, but a useful celebration, and drawing on these three inspiring examples, maybe we might like to think, was it Benjamin Franklin who said that in every problem you can see an opportunity? Well, maybe the advanced technique on that is in every problem to see an opportunity for yourself and also for others. So maybe we could take a moment, a quiet moment during the day, to explore, even if we're addressing our fundamental challenges collaboratively, is there one important aspect of our work that we're not yet working on collaboratively, and how might we build a bigger solution to that part of our activity by working with others? And if you happen to get stuck, I think I forgot to mention it, but there is a I look forward to continuing the conversations downstairs.
Paul, are you open for a question, if you don't mind?
I was hoping they would be downstairs, but sure, fire away.
That'll be fine. Just a quick one. When you talk about collaborative advantage and you look at markets, I have some experience working in Southeast Asia and the Far East, where collaborative advantage could be looked at as a disadvantage. Very singularly driven, individualistic organizations that look upon competition more than collaboration. How would you see introduction of collaborative advantages into these organizations that are led more by competition? Is it destructive to have both mindsets in a single organization where maybe the upper management or top management is looking for collaborative advantage, but the deputies or the lower management and the employees are just very much based on a mindset of competitive advantage? And would that create a destruction in the chain, and in the future of organization, with that behavior in these territories, whether it's Japan, whether it's the Far East, whether it's Southeast Asia?
So you have to always pay attention to the cultural specifics of each circumstance. So one of the things that's interesting in creating collaborative advantage is that, in a sense, you're always beginning with the unknown, because you're beginning with other people. So it's really important to, first of all, seek to understand the particular culture, and then see what the right way to enable that culture to move forwards might be. I mean, just to give an example, in the UK, we are quite comfortable with closed circuit television. There's a lot of it here, and there isn't a constant protest of that. On the other hand, if you try to introduce ID cards in the UK, it's not going to work. Germany, on the other hand, very happy to have ID cards, but if you start filming them all over the place, then suddenly you have a problem. So I would say the first thing to do is to understand a particular culture, to understand what it is seeking to enable people to do better. Because any business, if you're not enabling people to do something better, you have to question the long-term viability of the business. And once you've identified what you can enable the world to do better, all of a sudden I think that can open your mind to all of the myriad ways in which talent, information, resource outside your organisation can also support people in doing that better, and identify more resilient business models, better mechanisms of engagement, exciting new partnerships and so on as a result.
I worked for a Japanese company for 15 years, and actually collaboration is not hardwired into Japanese business culture as far as I can see at all. And even if the top leadership of an organisation really does want to make a change, you've got this sort of permafrost layer of middle managers whose livelihoods depend on keeping their own job going. I personally think businesses who continue to behave like that will die, even in more competitive type of cultures in business. I really do believe that eventually global economic demand will require companies to behave more collaboratively. They simply have to survive. So it might be a bit of a sort of doomsday scenario, but I think even Asian businesses will eventually have to address the concept.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. And I'm not disappearing. I'm going to be around here at the museum essentially until you have all finished with me.
It's free consultancy.
So I look forward to taking it downstairs.
I'm Alex Epstein. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Big Change. We are an online cloud-based system to help companies plan, manage, schedule and track their mobile workforces. It's very timely that Paul has launched this book about collaborative advantage, because we're launching a new collaboration platform as part of our system. We want to help small businesses to become big businesses. We want to help them grow and accelerate through collaboration. By working together, they can both make margin, they can both grow quicker than they could grow separately. And actually our collaboration platform is completely within the spirit of Paul's book and the different ideas and concepts that he puts forward. So I'm delighted to be here at the launch of Collaborative Advantage. This is Paul's first book and hopefully the first of many. So I wish Paul and the team all the very best with this. And what an innovative idea, and I'm sure this will be the first of many books that tackle this very opportune and timely notion of collaborative advantage.
Hello, my name is Randolph Kent. I'm from King's College London. Collaborative advantage comes at a time when the world in general is faced by a crisis of confidence. Institutions feel threatened. Their capacities to survive more and more on the edge. And here I believe that collaborative advantage, in its most broad sense, really does offer the global system a way of looking at itself, looking at its objectives, looking at the way it performs to say, possibly we have found an alternative, a way of bringing all of us together on a global scale that goes beyond the traditional assumptions that competition is ultimately beneficial, that winning is the only way to go, and rather replaces it with a sense that together, as a united whole, recognizing our differences and, dare I say, our competition, all of that can be reconciled and brought together for the benefit of all.
Hi, I'm Sarah Speak, Global CMO and founder of the consultancy Speak Up. I would like to use collaborative advantage to change the current business culture. So I think particularly as a CMO, there is an ability for us to drive an internal conversation, because I see the marketing function as the glue internally, for starters, between marketing, sales, our age-old bedfellows, as much as product, technology, IT, increasingly compliance and legal, not least since the advent of GDPR. So that's the internal piece, and I think that's really critical for business success. having a shared goal and really collaborating internally. I think the external piece, we've moved in part, but have a way to go still, on working as brands with our agency networks. So over the years, we've seen an awful lot of instances where we on the client side have pushed our agencies to lower their price, and therefore we've enjoyed a much, much lower level of seniority and experience on some of the people that have been put on our accounts. Some of the best examples of amazing campaigns that I've seen over the years have been where we've driven a purely collaborative view between media owners, agencies and us on the branding side.
I'm Michael Martin, and founder and chief executive of InnerCycle, and we like to use Collaborative Advantage to help bring purpose and meaning and direction to people who have concerns about their well-being, mental ill health, and we do that through a combination of individual cycling plans and helping people with their vocational choices and a roster of therapists. So we describe ourselves as a cycling charity for mental health.
So I'm Professor Aladdin. I teach strategy and innovation, and I advise governments, companies and the not-for-profit sector on strategy, but I'm also an artist, and I also work around violence. So these three areas: culture, social development and strategy, which are collaborative and interdisciplinary, and actually that brings me to Paul Skinner's book and his concept of collaborative advantage. So we are here in a postcode which I think is W11, which is Notting Hill. We are in the shadow of a tower, the Grenfell Tower, and just last week I was in a procession commemorating the first anniversary of the fire. So today I just am strongly inclined to feel that, well, if I were to use such a book, I'd use it literally around this building and with the communities who've been touched by the bad side of, you can say, brand and packaging and appearance, which is to keep people apart. And I think Collaborative Advantage brings people together and creates good business, creates sustainable processes, and can make us feel proud that we have worked together on something. And it was a room full of extraordinary people, I felt, who were at their book launch, about 100 people, I guess. And I think they probably feel quite proud of how they work, which is with the idea of collaborative advantage.